Thank you, Dr. Park, for being here. Dr. Park is an assistant professor of medical sciences at Columbia University Medical Center and a member of the Herbert Irving Comprehensive Cancer Center. She is trained as a mechanical engineer with a PhD in biomedical engineering focused on heart-lung machine medical device development. Dr. Park completed postdoctoral training at Yale University, developing minimally invasive cardiovascular support systems. Since joining Columbia in 2020, Dr. Park has transitioned her research to data science and oncology with a focus on leveraging electronic health records and predictive modeling for cancer early detection. Her work has been supported by an NIH R21, NIH K25 Career Development Award, and a recent Department of Defense Award in pancreatic cancer research. And now I'll hand it off to her for the talk on transforming early cancer detection with EHR.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me here. Today, I'll be talking about how we can transform early cancer detection using electronic health records. So before we start, was a small summary of my background, but I would like to give you a brief introduction of myself and how I got into this field. So currently I'm in general medicine, but I actually started out in mechanical engineering. And at that time, I was inspired by a story of Korean PhD student at Stanford who made like top 50 scientists in New York Times for developing this lizard robot. I didn't know anything about robot at the time, but that got me into mechanical engineering. And I finished my senior year building this little paper cockroach robot from scratch. But then I had some craving for electrical engineering because I thought they are building something more functional. So I went into electronic focused biomedical engineering PhD program. And I started by building this infant CPR system. And then I did some microfluidic simulation study. And I built a real functional microfluidic system for cell culture. And then I ended up leading Korean national project for developing heart-lung machine for 3 years. So this was our prototype. And the thing behind it with blue cloth is a pig. So I did a lot of animal experiments, and I heard that they had 2 clinical trials after I graduated. Because of this experience, I met cardiac surgeon at the conference, and that's how I started my postdoc at cardiac surgery department. And my job was to build surgical tools for minimally invasive heart surgery. So I made some prototypes and I did some wireless powering work for implanted ventricular assist device. So as you can see, I've jumped around quite a bit. And to be honest, for a long time, I didn't have a clear professional identity because I wasn't doctor and I wasn't typical engineer. But then COVID happened. I had to stay home and then work with data like cardiac surgery database. And then I realized that I wanted to dive deeper in this area. That brought me into Columbia University Medical Center and started my cancer research. And since I joined Columbia in 2020, I was fortunate to get a couple grants, including the most recent one from Department of Defense. Then I found some peace and realized that wherever you are at, it's more about trying to solve problems. And I found my strength as someone who can adapt and bridge both fields. And I really love all the collaborations come with it. So far, my grants are all focusing on pancreatic cancer. But then when I first learned about EHR foundation models, I've been thinking, why just pancreatic cancer? Maybe I can target multiple cancers. Because I think the beauty of foundation model is its transferability across various downstream tests. That's why models like ChatGPT can do well on everything from translation, image recognition, and reasoning. And I know that there are real experts in this department working on EHR foundation models, but my work is more about how I applied EHR foundation models in cancer research and how it forms for early cancer detection. This is a big picture idea of how for early cancer detection. This was actually my R1 proposal I submitted a couple weeks ago. And thanks to, first of all, thanks to Matt and Orson for agreeing to collaborate on this project. So my idea is that by leveraging EHR foundation model, we can build a pipeline for multi-cancer predictions. However, one of the most important aspects of actually using this pipeline in real clinical setting is model interpretability. So the one idea that I proposed was to create chatbot where a clinician can interact with the model. So I'm going to share more details about this idea and our early prototype of this project later in this talk. Here is a quick overview of my talk today. I'll start with why EHR data matters for early cancer detection and walk you through some of my prior work focusing on pancreatic cancer and how we can evaluate clinical utility of EHR-based predictive models compared to traditional risk factors, and how foundation models perform in early cancer detection. After that, we will talk about developing conversational AI for model interpretability and wrap up with some of future projects that I have in mind along this line. So first part, why EHR data matters. EHR data is really a long, rich, longitudinal patient-level health information that contains comprehensive patient journey from diagnostics to treatments through multiple visits. However, current screening guidelines only covers very few number of cancers like breast, cervical, colorectal, and lung, and they are primarily based on very narrowed criteria like age or single risk factors such as smoking history. In other words, we are not effectively using all of this rich information we have in EHR data. Our hypothesis is that this rich information contains pre-diagnostic signals for cancer, which means if we can build on effective predictive models using EHR data, we could better identify high-risk individuals. For example, in this general population, our goal is to capture this small number of cancers earlier. Currently, we are identifying high-risk cohort based on current screening guidelines, which includes both false positives and true positives. We send them to imaging for diagnostics. But if we have an effective EHR-based predictive models, we may be able to enrich this high-risk cohort by reducing false positives and increasing true positives, improving early detection. This approach could be also integrated with tools like liquid biopsy to make screening even more precise. So to build these predictive models using EHR data for early cancer detection, I started by focusing on pancreatic cancer. The reason is that pancreatic cancer is currently third leading cause of cancer-related deaths, following lung cancer and colorectal cancer, and it is projected to become the second by 2030. More importantly, compared to other cancers, pancreatic cancer has a very low 5-year relative survival rates of 13%. This is mainly because it is often found at late stages, and we don't have effective early detection methods yet. But if we catch it at stage 1 or 2, before it spreads, 5-year relative survival jumps to 44%. That really highlights how crucial the early cancer detection can be. I started my EHR data analysis by focusing on lab data, which includes temporal information for each lab variable over time. One of the first things that I noticed is a significant discrepancies in the number of measurements for each lab variable between case and control group. That led me to hypothesize that these structural discrepancies might limit models' predictive accuracy because models might ended up focusing more on these differences in data structure than on the actual lab measurements themselves. So I came up with this random masking strategy to balance out lab frequencies. The idea is that we randomly sample the number of measurements from lower frequency group and then apply back to the higher frequency group. So for example, the first sample is 3. which means 3 slots are open, but the first patient has only 2 measurements, so we use all 2 measurements. The second random sample is 5, so we just use the first 5 measurements. And the third sample is 1, so we just take 1 sample from the third patient. In this way, we can match these 2 distributions. So this is how the real measurements matching looks like. And we found that this random masking strategy improves predictive performance. The second issue that I noticed in the lab is a lot of redundant variables, basically the same measurements, but appeared under different names. So looking at this EHR workflow, I've been thinking, what if we combine this redundant information within the structure and furthermore, combine related variables into clinically meaningful composite indices, just like how BMI combines height and weight into a single measure. Then we don't have to see all those noise in feature importance analysis. So I have this hypothesis that grouping variables in clinical domain could improve model interpretability, but I was also wondering whether this approach might limit performance. To test this hypothesis, we built an architecture with 3 layers. The first layer is embedding layer, embedding each lab variable. And the second layer consolidates those redundant information into 32 combo variables. And the third layer organizes these variables into clinically meaningful composite indices. For example, grouping by organ systems like liver function, kidney function, diabetes function, and so on. When we looked at the predictive performance, combining redundant information seems to give us a little bit of performance boost. And we tested 3 different ways of creating composite indices. First one was grouping by organ system, but unfortunately at the time we couldn't come up with a more innovative way of combining these variables into meaningful composite indices. So these 2 ways are based on correlation matrix within different thresholding, which doesn't really have clinical relevance, but it's more of data-driven approach. And we found that this grouping does not hurt performance, but could improve interpretability. For example, near the diagnosis, kidney function turned out to be the most relevant predictor for pancreatic cancer risk, but earlier on, it's more about diabetes-related variables. This work is also along the line with grouping strategy, because looking at this temporal information, I've been thinking maybe trend over time is more important than absolute lab measurements themselves. So I tested a model using these trend features, and it improved model performance by 20%. And it also provided more insightful interpretation. For example, how often there is short-term upward trend in red blood cell distribution width turned out to be a useful signal for pancreatic cancer risk. And there were, in fact, several studies showing that elevated red blood cell distribution width is associated with pancreatic cancer and also indicate poor prognosis or advanced stages. And in 2023, there was a milestone in this field. A national scale deep learning model for early detection of pancreatic cancer published in Nature Medicine. The model was trained on 24,000 pancreatic cancer cases from Danish National Patient Registry, and the model was cross-validated on USPA data. They used ICD codes, and they tested a couple different model types, including bag of words, MLP, GRU, and transformer. And they showed that transformer model performed the best, achieving RC of 0.88 for predicting within 36 months. But when the model was cross-validated on USPA data, AURC dropped to 0.71. After retraining the model on USPA data, it went up to 0.78. They also tested after removing 0 to 3 month data, which dropped the performance from 0.88 to 0.83 in Danish data and from 0.78 to 0.76 in USVA data. After reading this work, since ICD codes have their unique condition names, so I've been thinking, what if we use pre-trained embeddings for these medical condition names instead of training the model from randomly initialized embeddings for these medical condition names? So I tested pre-trained embeddings from OpenAI GPT, Relational Graph Evolutional Network, and another large language model, Mistral. For relational graph convolutional network, we built a model based on OMAP ancestor and descendant structure. And we tested this idea on Columbia and Cedars-Sinai data, and GPT embeddings consistently improved predictive performance. Another interesting finding was that when we tested model excluding 0 to 3 month data, 3 to 6 month prediction dropped, but 6 to 12-month prediction improved for both data sets, which suggests that strong indicators of pancreatic cancer that we normally see near the diagnosis, for example, pancreatitis, jaundice, disorder of pancreas, may appear up to 6 months, but not likely earlier than that. So up to this point, I've really focused on pancreatic cancer and tried to test different architectures and techniques to improve predictive performance. But then I realized that there is a bigger question that we need to answer. Do EHR-based predictive models actually offer real clinical values over traditional risk factors like age or smoking history currently used in screening guidelines? If so, how much? So to answer that question, I compared EHR-based model with those traditional risk factors for identifying high-risk cohort. For example, for pancreatic cancer, there is no standard screening guidelines, but there is an ongoing clinical trials for pancreatic cancer screening called CAPS. Eligible participants are individuals with these gene mutations or family history of pancreatic cancer. To compare EHR-based model with these risk factors, we use data from all of us, designed to represent US population. So far, they've collected data from over 867,000 participants. And what's unique about this data set is that it covers all kinds of data from genomics, EHR data, wearable data, physical measurement, and survey responses, so that it really allows us to compare EHR-based models with risk factors, including gene mutations and family history of cancer. So using this data set, we identified 4,700 carriers and 360 pancreatic cancer cases. A standard way of building predictive model is we split the data into training and test set and build a model on training set and evaluate the model on the test set. So the test set can be viewed as hypothetical general population. To quantify how well each criteria enrich high-risk cohorts, we use the metric called lift. For example, this is hypothetical general population, and if we were to screen everyone, 100% of population, there are 72 pancreatic cancer cases, which corresponds to the prevalence of 207 per 100,000. If we focus on the group with gene mutations, even though this is only 0.8% of population, the prevalence of pancreatic cancer is 4.96 higher than general population. In other words, we can effectively enrich high-risk cohorts by focusing on this group. If we focus on the history of any cancers, the lift drops under 1, which means it performs worse than screening everyone. If we focus on family history of pancreatic cancer, the lift is 3.45. Now, what happens if we use EHR model? If we use EHR model, we can assign risk scores to everyone and select top 10% or 20% for screening. So depending on these thresholds, which is, we can, the lift value changes. But what we are interested in is what is the lift value EHR model can achieve at the same coverage as these risk factors. For example, at 0.8% coverage, EHR model, which is same as carrier group, EHR model can achieve lift of 20.2. At 1.6% coverage, same as family history of pancreatic cancer, lift by EHR model is 12.9. So this data really shows that EHR model can create more effective high-risk cohort than traditional risk factors. We compared the EHR model with new onset diabetes group as well, because many recent studies suggesting that having diabetes later in life may be an early warning sign of pancreatic cancer. In general population, common age for new onset diabetes is around 60, which aligns with our cohort. This group makes up about 13% of population, but their lift is way under 1, which means this is not a great standalone screening indicator. If we focus on those over age 60, then lift becomes slightly above 1, but by having EHR model, we can boost lift over 4, significantly improving our screening effectiveness. EHR model is also effective as complementary tool. So far, we've seen how well it works on its own, but if we combine EHR model with risk factors, we can still significantly improve the lift value compared to using risk factor alone, which is indicated by these red dots. However, this approach is expanding high-risk cohort. The overall lift actually decreases compared to using EHR model alone. That's because we are inevitably bringing false positives from risk factor cohort. So that's, yes. And then, but the point is that by using them together, we can have substantial improvements in lift compared to just traditional risk factors. For example, risk factor alone, lift is 3.87 at 0.8% coverage. But by using them together, we can achieve lift of 5.8 while expanding the coverage to 3.7%. To expand our analysis, we built the same baseline models across 26 cancer types. Where XGBoost models generally performed better than logistic regression model. Focusing on these red highlighted 8 cancer types, we did the same analysis of evaluating EHR model performance compared to traditional risk factors. An EHR model effectively enriched high-risk cohort in most scenarios, either as standalone or complementary tool. One of the few cases where EHR model wasn't effective was colorectal cancer, which currently has screening guideline based on age 45 or older. EHR model provided similar lift value, but EHR model is not bound by age, which means it offers an opportunity to identify early onset cancers. In fact, there is a concerning rise in early onset colorectal cancers with the highest mortality rates. So in this case, using EHR model together with this age risk factor could be an ideal option. Another interesting observation was stomach cancer, which turned out to be the most difficult cancer to predict among these 8 cancer types. If we focus on family history of stomach cancer, it achieves pretty good, decent lift value around 6, but EHR model couldn't further improve this lift value. H. pylori, an emerging risk factor for stomach cancer, EHR model wasn't more effective than this risk factor, but if we use EHR model together with this risk factor, we were able to see an added value. So now we've seen that EHR model can be an effective tool for early cancer detection, even with baseline models. But now we are stepping into this advanced large language model area. So where do we go from here? That brings us to talk about foundation models. So unlike these baseline models, which was specifically trained to predict cancer risk, these AI models were not trained for a single specific task. It was trained on general purpose. For example, using large-scale text data, it was trained to predict next words. So the model trained in this way is called foundation models. By structuring EHR data in timelines, we can apply similar training strategies by predicting next medical events. And this is a simplified description of how we develop EHR foundation models. And there are three main approaches of leveraging EHR foundation models in predictive modeling. First, feature representation. If we input single patient data into the model outputs numerical vector, which is embeddings, and we use these embeddings for clustering or risk stratification. Second, zero-shot prediction. Since the model was trained to predict next medical events, if we provide patient baselines like gender, age, preconditions, the model starts to generate next medical events. And based on that, we can quantify the future risk of these patients for certain disease. Third, synthetic data generation. This is similar to zero-shot prediction in terms of generating next medical events, but focusing on generating realistic patient trajectories, like real data. One interesting use case is that when we leverage these synthetic data in model training, model performance increases. So for leveraging EHR foundation models for early cancer detection, we are focusing on feature representation approach. And there are several EHR foundation models which we can use for this purpose. This SureGPT is our EHR foundation model developed in Columbia. And there is Motor developed from Stanford, which provides state-of-the-art performance for feature representation approach. While SureGPT is generative because it was trained based on next token prediction, but Motor is not generative. It has different training objectives, which is time to event prediction. So instead of next token prediction, it's predicting the probability of event happening over time, like survival curve. So focusing on these two EHR foundation models, we evaluated EHR foundation model performance for early cancer detection using Columbia and all of us data. So we tested across 20 cancer types for 1 year risk, and EHR foundation models outperformed baseline models nearly all 26 cancer types in Columbia data. In all of us, EHR foundation models outperformed in 15 cancer types. And you can see that there is wider confidence intervals for all of us data. It's mainly because we have way less sample size in all of us. For example, we have 2,000 pancreatic cancer cases in Columbia, but in all of us, we have only 360 pancreatic cancer cases. When we looked at the data distribution, while Columbia has a larger number of unique vocabularies, all of us data is richer, denser in terms of sequence length. And also, age distribution in Columbia data was a bit more skewed. Overall, calibration results were pretty good across all models, but we did observe that EHR foundation models were generally calibrated better than baseline models. When we drilled down to single cancer subgroups, SureGPT showed better calibration than Motor. For prediction made 36 months before diagnosis, EHR foundation models still outperformed baseline models in 18 cancer types, including pancreas, liver, and kidney, which currently lack screening guidelines. More importantly, this foundation model 36-month prediction was as good as or even better than baseline 12-month prediction. Okay, now, predictive performance have become way more powerful with the EHR foundation models. But then what about model interpretability? Many studies, including my prior work, mostly relied on well-known framework like SHEP or LINE, which gives you the list of feature importance based on their contributions to the prediction. However, these methods can add a lot of noise, especially in large-scale data, making it difficult to extract actionable insights. For foundation models, which have far greater complexity and parameter counts, these methods are practically invisible. So we likely need to explore gradient-based methods, which I haven't worked on yet, but I'm planning to dive into it soon. But based on my experience, giving this list of feature importance to clinicians doesn't make them build the trust in the tool. It actually makes them more skeptical when they see features that don't seem clinically meaningful without any further explanations. So what I'm proposing is that we leverage AI's human-like reasoning ability to build a clinician-facing interface where clinicians can interactively review how the model reached its predictions. One key element in this design is that we integrate clinical notes so that clinicians can have additional context about the patient and also cross-check or validate model predictions. If we were to use clinical notes in the model training, it's highly likely that model loses context because clinical notes can be extremely long for each patient. But within this design, we can selectively choose most relevant parts of the notes and maximize their utility. So for the patient flagged as high risk, we designed the system to first generate SOAP-style notes, which is a standardized method that clinicians are actually using for documenting patient care. The primary endpoint that we would like to see is whether clinicians can identify false positives in the high-risk cohort identified by EHR model through this kind of interactions and make the high-risk cohort even more precise or accurate. So we did some experiments to see the feasibility of this idea. First, we wanted to see how current LLM can predict patient risk just from this patient timelines that we used to train the EHR model. So we started with very simple prompt asking, predict patient's risk of pancreatic cancer on a scale of 0 to 1 based on the provided timelines. And compared to XGBoost AURC of 0.83, LLM's prediction was about 0.73, which wasn't that bad. And then we were wondering, what if we give LLM more information? For example, in the sample data that we used, there was a big age differences between case and control. Even though this age information is in the patient timelines, LM doesn't know the discrepancies of these age differences between case and control. So when we added little note about this discrepancy, the LM's prediction improved to 0.79, and also LM's predictive risk scores better aligned with EHR model's risk scores. And then we provided SHAP information, model-derived features. Then LM got even better, and its prediction lined up more closely with the EHR model. So basically, by incorporating more specific domain knowledge or model-derived features, we can help LM explanations better align with predictive model. So this video shows how the interface works. So for the patient flagged as high risk, it first generates SOAP-style notes for clinicians to review, and then clinician can ask follow-up questions like what are the medications given for a certain condition. Okay, last chapter, future plan. So I have a few small projects lined up to kickstart this vision. So I would like to share some of those details about the next steps for each aim. Okay, for aim 1, we propose to use Epicos database, one of the largest EHR database with over 300 million patient data. This Epicosmos team already developed their own foundation model called COMET, focusing on zero-shot prediction. We are planning to train the similar model, but focusing on feature representation learning. Even though we cannot export the model trained on this database, it'll be still interesting to see how it compares with our local models. We are going to develop this Cosmos proxy model by pre-training and fine-tuning across 3 independent EPIC sites, Columbia, Cedars-Sinai, and Mount Sinai, and evaluate this proxy model performance, how closely it performs compared to Cosmos model. And we also plan to externally validate this proxy model on USVA data. To compare Cosmos and proxy model, we can leverage publicly available EHR shop benchmark datasets. And to build proxy model, since we are not merging database, we are sharing model weights. So the order of fine-tuning and which tests that we are evaluating could matter. So we laid out detailed training and evaluation strategies. So we will start by comparing local baselines, and then we can evaluate transferability. For example, pre-train on Columbia data, and then fine-tune it on Cedars-Sinai data. And if this combined model works well on Cedars-Sinai data, then its local model, then it demonstrates transferability. We can also test this combined model on scene data, external data set from Mount Sinai, which will show cross-site generalizability. Then we will fine-tune the model across 3 sites within different orders to comprehensively evaluate the performance of proxy model. For AIM-2, our goal is to build a pipeline for multi-cancer predictions. But before moving forward, I think it's important to evaluate accuracy of cancer diagnosis we identified from structured EHR data. So this is pipeline that we developed to identify cancer cohort and classify them into specific cancers in structured EHR data. Since we used the OMAP dataset, we started with the highest concept ID named malignant neoplastic disease. And under that concept ID, there are about 54,000 concept IDs. So by prompting GPT model, we classified these 54,000 concept names into specific cancer types. So we started with very simple prompt, but through this iterative refinement with expert feedback, our prompt got very detailed and specific, achieving 94% mapping accuracy. So we can apply this similar approach to clinical notes to extract the cancer diagnosis and compare them with the one we identified from structured EHR data. Through this evaluation, we'll be able to see if there is any diagnosis accuracy variations across institutions or cancer types. We will be also able to assess the impact of diagnosis accuracy on model performance. And more importantly, we might be able to come up with more optimized strategies for identifying cancer diagnosis in structured EHR data, for example, using data from all domains instead of just focusing on conditions. Another important task in AIM-2 is optimizing model thresholds for identifying high-risk cohort for each cancer type. Our strategy is that we first need to come up with candidate threshold range. For example, risk factor of family history of pancreatic cancer provides lift of 4 at 2% coverage. Baseline EHR model provides lift of 8 at the same 2% coverage. And we are expecting to have higher lift from foundation models. So we can expand the coverage until the lift drops to something comparable to risk factor lift value. That way, we can come up with candidate threshold range. Then in step 2, we can evaluate this candidate threshold through counterfactual retrospective analysis and come up with the best threshold. For example, this patient was diagnosed cancer at stage 3. We can apply model with 2% thresholding and estimate the risk using these preconditions. At this time, the patient was at low risk. We can apply the same model after 3 months. And when we re-evaluated it with more conditions, now the patient is flagged as high risk. This is 12 months before prediction, and also based on the cancer progression rate, we can estimate cancer stage as well. So by repeating this experiment across different thresholds, we can come up with detailed outcome report showing how many cases flagged how much earlier, how many unnecessary scans involved, what was the cost of screening workup, and estimated potential stage shift. So this analysis will give us help us to understand the impact of deploying EHR-based predictive models in real clinical setting and come up with pick the best threshold for identifying high-risk cohort for each cancer type. For AIM-3, we need to evaluate whether this clinician facing interface is really useful. We can start with a small cohort, for example, focusing on early onset cancers. As we discussed earlier, there is a concerning rise in early onset colorectal cancer with highest mortality rates. So we plan to start with colorectal cancer, identify high-risk cohort using EHR data, EHR model, and just focusing on people under age 45, we can apply clinician-facing interface and ask this list of questions that we developed and see if the high-risk cohort filtered by clinicians through this interface has higher enrichment than the one from EHR model alone. The last project that I would like to briefly share is that it's not about cancer, but since we have EHR foundation models, I got really interested in genomic foundation models, and I met really good collaborator who's been working on genomic foundation models. So far, I have 2 publications related to genomic data analysis, and one of them is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is extremely difficult to diagnose. Currently, to identify high-risk cohort, clinicians are relying on rare variants, and it's true that if you have these rare variants, odds ratio for developing IPF significantly increases. But 75% of IPF patients do not have these rare variants. And also, there are people who have rare variants but do not develop IPF. People think that the polygenic risk scores play role in these complications. But our hypothesis is that genomic foundation models that learned based on the entire DNA sequence may give richer information and better predictive performance. So we first tested EHR foundation models on this cohort, and EHR foundation model provided significantly better performance than baseline models. And then we looked at predictive power of genotypes that polygenic risk scores based on, and genotypes didn't really have predictive power. Then we tested genomic foundation model focusing on the first 4 genes, and it showed promising predictive performance, especially TERT, which shows 12% contribution to the rare variants compared to the other genes less than 5%. TERT provided the strongest predictive performance. And when we combined all these 4 genes, we saw a URC of 0.97. This is like experiments with the small samples among the entire IPF cohort, so we have to further validate it, but we were very excited to see this compelling preliminary results.
Right. I have a question about previous stuff. So when you say you selected for the top 4 genes in in pulmonary fibrosis, how did you select these 4 genes?
Oh, this is from the lung physicians that we are collaborating with. That's where we got the information.
I see.
Yeah. Is that? Oh, okay.
Good enough for me.
Okay. So in summary, advances in AI led to the development of foundation models trained on longitudinal EHR data, which showed strong potential to advance early cancer detection, particularly for the cancers that currently lack screening guidelines. Conversational AI may further enhance clinicians' trust in model prediction and improve precision through interactive clinician-AI collaborations. I believe the next frontier is going to be multi-model foundation models combining EHR data, image, genomics, and wearable data. But I think we need to more focus on interpretability side of it. One important future direction is to bring this framework into clinical settings to evaluate it prospectively and assess its real clinical impact on early cancer detection and patient care. I would like to make special thanks to Dr. Chinher and Dr. Nicholas Tatunedi, who's been very supportive since I joined Columbia. And I also want to thank Chao Peng. Many of you would already know, but not here anymore. But I really enjoyed working with them. And thanks to him, I was able to step into this EHR Foundation model area. I'm really grateful for all the supports and look forward to continuing collaborations with many of you in the future. Thank you.
So with your, like the clinician interface where they're able to ask an LLM questions, there's two like purposes for that, right? One is to interpretability purposes, and the second is to improve risk prediction. How does that exactly work? I guess I'm a little bit confused because you're giving the LLM some like explanation, background of the actual model, the SHAP values, for example, and the clinician's able to ask it more questions about the interpretability.
Yes. So my idea is that instead of that static list of feature importance, if the like interactive way could make clinicians believe in the model predictions more, and also by integrating clinical notes, we can cross-check its predictions as well, or have additional information from clinical notes as well. And the second part that we really want to see whether this is really useful is that if clinicians can identify false positives through these interactions and enrich that high-risk cohort further, then I think that's one way of proving this usefulness of utility of this clinician-facing interface. Yes.
Can I ask a follow-up question to this? Thank you so much. Very interesting talk. So you're thinking about this as mostly interpretability. Have you considered from the perspective of giving users more control and more influence over model performance? If, for example, if they can understand how different features contribute, can they change importance of different features and say that I actually think that this should be a lot more prominent and has a lot more impact on this decision here?
Do you think, are you saying that like intercepting the model predictions by giving clinicians domain knowledge into the system?
Well, so if clinicians, for example, based on their result of intuition goes into it, a lot of experience, and they can say, in my experience, this feature actually, your model may not see it as such, but I think it should be a lot more impactful here. So I want to up the weight of that feature and see how it changes the prediction.
I think that's a really great idea because this whole purpose is to having interaction with AI and clinicians. And if through these interactions, if AI can learn more about it based on what clinicians think, then I think it'll be meaningful. But one concern is that then it'll be a little bit far away from the EHR, the model that we used, because it's important to have like more accurate information, but also it's also important to understand how model behaves. So I think there should be some balance.
Yeah. It's interesting to see if there are ways to maybe create some interaction between them.
Yes, that's
cool. Thank you.
Yes.
I really enjoyed this talk.
Thank you.
I guess first question is like, so is the LLM interface with the like EHR foundation model, is it primarily supposed to be like give SHAP values, give event stream, and then like reason over both of them, be like the SHAP values said this, and then here's what the timeline was, and then kind of serve, is it just supposed to like summarize that to the physician?
Oh, actually, so those like model derived features should be from only the patient timelines.
So you don't have, so it's not reasoning over the SHAP values.
It can do reasoning over the SHAP values, I think. But so it can give, based on the SHAP values, it'll give you how model behaved with this data, why the model predicted this patient high risk, right? But this is based on the patient timelines, but sometimes there are so many noise and it could be biased. So that's why we are integrating clinical notes so that clinicians can selectively choose whatever they, I mean, if shared values is like really, not clinically meaningful, then that would, cross out this patient is false positives. And we want to see whether that decision makes differences.
Second question. Okay. So going back to I think it was like your masking, like early on.
Random masking strategy.
Yeah. I guess I was a little confused, like, so don't mind explaining, like, why the random masking? Or one, I guess if you could explain the masking strategy again.
Sure.
It was like resampling from your like positives, basically.
Right.
And why that would induce like a temporal, like I was a little confused at the intuition as to why that masking strategy would affect like temporal, like why could you get earlier predictions from a masking strategy like that?
I think masking strategy is not for earlier predictions because when I saw the significant discrepancies in the number of measurements between case and control, I feel like models can just make decisions based on the length of the measurements as a case or control.
Oh, okay. I think I misunderstood. Okay, that makes sense.
All right, so to focus more on the lab measurements themselves, that's the whole point for random masking strategy. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much for the talk. I had a question, which is, I believe your vision that these multimodal foundation models will be used for these patient level prediction tasks. But I'm curious if there's still space for the more traditional models where you go through and feature engineer, come up with features, whether they're trends or lab values, and then sort of train like a tabular model on that, and where one might be more useful than the other, or if the foundational models are better and will replace these more traditional models.
Right. I mean, I think it's like more like detailed technical questions for like who's working on architecture, I think, because it's more of interpretability as well, right? But I've seen people developing architecture within like very different ways. Like, for example, one interesting application was that there is lab values that fluctuates a lot, but there is also lab values that is steady. So if it's steady, if that spikes, that means, oh, something wrong, right? It's easy to predict, but some values that fluctuate a lot, it's hard to predict. So they are masking on those difficult questions more and try to improve predictions. I think that's kind of integrating, those domain knowledge information into the model, but also for feature representation right now, based on my experience, logistic regression is like the linear probing, it's giving better performance than applying other complicated the algorithm there. But I know that there are people are trying different algorithms like KNN and things like that. So that's something technically we need to more explore to make the model more interpretable and having good performance.
Thank you.
Is it?
Question? The first question is, your model, it was an EHR foundation model with ontology expert and event-driven regs. How do you, and then the second part of that question is, how did you constrain the LM to produce reasonably deterministic?
Oh, I think it's a little bit mixed up because EHR foundation model is separate, and the study that one of the previous study is applying those ontology in the model. So I'm not sure if it's asking like how the EHR foundation models combined with those domain knowledge would work, which I haven't done in that way.
Yes.
And the second question?
Question was, your conversational AI research, did you explore chain of thought or other prompting methods to augment your clinical note grounding, so note generation?
Oh, not yet. That's something that I laid out in the proposal as well. Yes, chain of thoughts. That's definitely we can consider to have better interactions with human and the interface.
For the one where I think you're like, you had the model where you like group features and then trained and then did chat. I was wondering, like, did you guys, like, is there any reason you can just like train the model, get chat values, and then group the chat values afterwards instead?
No, it's just one streamline. So we had a 3 layers that does combining in a different
Oh, no, I
purpose.
guess I mean just like instead of any combination, just like training on all the features, getting chat values for each of the features. And then chat values are additive, so you can just add them. Like, I guess like group the chat values because they're additive, but
Right.
yeah.
That's true. Yeah, at the time I didn't really,
I was just curious. Okay.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because it's additive if it's a chat algorithm. That's true.